Hello everyone and welcome back to another movie review here on the channel. I've been doing a lot this week, so if you're liking the movie reviews, definitely leave a like and subscribe to the channel because we're going to have a lot more here in the future. But today we're going to be talking about the Tomorrow War, which is starring Chris Pratt and Yvonne Strahovski from Chuck fame and Guardians of the Galaxy. I love these two actors. I think they have some great things in the past, and I was not very excited for this movie if I'm being honest. It's directed by Chris McKay, who has done some great stuff in animation and other films in the past, a lot of great comedies, and this is an action alien invasion movie essentially. That's the plot of this movie is in 30 years in the future, there's this war going on with these aliens that have come to attack the planet Earth, and the future soldiers sent themselves into the past to recruit people to bring them to fight in the future war. And so this movie has a lot of great concepts and great ideas, and although it doesn't reach the heights of those concepts and ideas, I really enjoyed it for the most part. I think there's a lot of weak moments and a lot of flaws in this movie. I think it's a serviceable enough movie that is still extremely entertaining to watch, and so that way I would recommend it. But I am going to be talking about this movie in spoilers because there's a lot of things that happen in this movie that I really want to talk about. So let's just jump right into this thing. This movie is kind of split up into three sections. So you have the first section, which is where Chris Pratt is kind of essentially pulled into the fold of what's going on. Then you have the second part, which is him and Yvonne Strahovski kind of getting to know each other, and you find out certain things about her character that are very interesting. And then you have the third act, which kind of brings everything back into the present day and the wrap up of how they're going to end up destroying the aliens in this movie. And so let's start off with part one, which is kind of some basic setup. And at this point, I really wasn't really loving the movie. I think the comedy in this first act really did not land for me. Sam Richardson plays Charlie, who I end up liking for the most part by the end of the movie, but for some reason his comedy just didn't hit in the first half. Even Chris Pratt's comedy in the first half of this movie didn't work. And I think the main thing I would say is there's one scene at the beginning with him talking to his dad, J.K. Simmons, and they're having this moment where he's joking around. J.K. Simmons thinks he's wearing a wire, and so he splashes water on him and grabs him by the shirt to try to feel for the wire, and obviously Chris Pratt is not wearing a wire in that scene, and so they have like some sort of argument afterwards. But at first Chris Pratt is joking, like holding his shirt up like, oh, I'm telling the people the CIA is going to burst through the doors, whatever, and then he like slams on the table and starts yelling at his dad. And I think this first act has a lot of tonal inconsistencies because the movie wants to be serious and intense with the alien invasion, the threats of these future people coming and letting everybody know that this war is about to begin, and that Chris Pratt's character, being ex-military, is going to be going off for 7 days in this future war, and there's a lot of uncertainty that only 30% of people who go into this war end up coming back. So him and his wife are having some issues with that, of him going and him not wanting to leave his daughter behind, and all these different aspects of that being more serious. And then you have the comedic stuff, some comedic lines that he has as he's training to get ready to go to this war, and just that tonal inconsistencies throughout the first act was really bothering me. But I do think the concept of this is pretty good because you have ideas that the only people that are going to the future are characters who essentially won't affect things. There are characters who will die before they're even going to be in that timeline. So you find out pretty early on that Chris Pratt's character dies in 7 years in the main timeline, and so him going to the future won't really affect anything. And I think that is a great concept. You'll only bring people who are dying. And so there's this one character played by Edwin Hodge, who is the brother of Aldous Hodge from The Invisible Man, which I thought was a pretty cool connection. But this character says he's going to die in 6 months because he has cancer, so that's why he keeps on going back and back and back again to this future war, because he wants to die on his terms essentially. And I think this is a very interesting idea to deal with this character, and you don't get to find out what is going to happen to Chris Pratt's character until later on, how he dies. But with this side character, this soldier that is dealing with all these things, I think that was a much more interesting character to follow, because as it's set up, Chris Pratt's character is kind of basic. He was ex-military. He has, a family that he doesn't want to leave. He has a daughter, and he's sad to leave his daughter, and all these different, sort of kind of character introductions to him that just kind of seem cliched at this point. And so if it was any other actor besides Chris Pratt, I think other actors could have done this role very easily. But since it was Chris Pratt, you have that charisma that he carries with his role. So I think with another actor, it wouldn't be as good. Or with some actors, it might have been better. I don't know. I think Chris Pratt was serviceable enough in this role. Another interesting idea that they only talk about and they don't really delve deeper into this is that the future soldiers who have come back from the future are characters who have not yet been born. And so if they sent back an older character, maybe if they saw like their younger selves, or maybe there's some sort of tie with that sort of thing, it's never really delved into. It's just said said, and it's an idea that is presented with how the time travel works in this movie. And that's what I'm talking about. This movie has a lot of great concepts that aren't really fully fulfilled in this movie, which that is one that I was really interested in. You have this character, this soldier woman who has come back. She's like the main one who tells everybody what's going on in the future, and she's kind of training Chris Pratt's character briefly, a very brief moment of him training to go to this war. And the same thing with all these other characters who are definitely not soldiers. Chris Pratt is prepared for this because he is ex-military, but these are just random casual people that are being sent off to war. And so I wanted to really see these characters be trained actually instead of just being thrown into this situation. And so the first act of this movie really, I was really just kind of okay on, because they get into the future, they're kind of dropped a little too high. There's an issue with them being dropped into the world, so a lot of them die right off the bat, and you know they survive, and they're in this tower, and they need to go on a rescue mission, and they can't get the rescue mission, but they do find these vials that Yvonne Strahovski's character needs, and so they were able to get that. They have a great action scene against these white spikes, these alien creatures that they're fighting off against. And I think that's another weird thing, that the people in the future were like, we're not going to tell you what you're facing against, because if we tell you, then maybe you won't want to go, or maybe you'll have hesitation going, and all these different things. But maybe you should prepare your soldiers for what they're about to fight, to tell them what these creatures' weaknesses are before you're getting killed by them, because in a moment when they're already fighting these things, they say, oh, the belly and the neck are the weak spots of the male creatures. And you're like, okay, I wish we knew that like 10 minutes ago when we started fighting these things. And so all logic inconsistencies aside in this first act, by the time we get to the second act is where it really picks up, because you get to meet Yvonne Strahovski's character, who is playing the future version of Chris Pratt's daughter, which this is, again, another fantastic idea of this movie, and I think it's the best concept this movie has, that the movie really does try its best at fulfilling that concept. And I think that relationship between this father-daughter relationship of her being older and him knowing the younger version of her, and her knowing what happens to their relationship in the future, and what happens and how he dies. And even though it was just a car accident, which is how he died, but he left his family before that point, and his family kind of went into turmoil because of him. And so she has this sort of love-hate relationship with him in the future that he does not yet know of. And I think those ideas are flesh out enough in this movie where it's like, okay, I'm finally starting to care about Chris Pratt's character, because this second act kind of ditches the Charlie character, and it's really just Chris Pratt and Yvonne Strahovski, and you have them trying to figure out how to kill these different creatures. The female ones are much stronger, and they have a lot more tolerance to the different bioweapons that they're attacking them with, and they're trying to figure out a way to get this one toxin that's able to wipe all of these creatures out. And so that's their essential goal. And so this act is much more serious, much more dramatic, and this is what I wish the entirety of the movie was. Yes, there's a couple jokes within this sequence that did work, but it's just the first act really didn't set up this second part as well as it could have been. But the second act does end in a really truly fantastic action sequence of them being on the water base, and let's just go back a little bit. There's a whole sequence of them trying to capture the female creature, and this scene was exhilarating as well, because you get to see the father and daughter in action together in this sequence, and you get to see the struggle of them trying to capture this thing and really see how strong these creatures are, which I will say, the visual effects in this movie were a lot better than I was expecting it to be, because this was an Amazon Prime original movie. I thought, okay, maybe this movie is going to look lackluster in terms of the visual effects, but honestly, I really wish I saw this on the big screen, because it did look visually stunning with the visual effects that it had. But yes, we get into this little water base, and they're trying to figure out how to make this toxin, and at the last minutes, they have all of these creatures, all these white spikes try to break into this facility, and they're able to do so, and then the female creature gets out and starts attacking them, and you have them essentially on the run. They have a very short amount of time before Chris Pratt is zapped back into the past, and this entire sequence was the best action sequence in the movie. I really love this. This is where I really started to like this movie. I was like, okay, wow, this is very well directed. This action is very, very entertaining. It's tense, and you don't know what's going to happen to these characters, because at a point, Yvonne Strahovski's character is hanging off this edge. She's stabbed by one of those spikes that the creature shoots, and she is very much in peril. And Chris Pratt has the vial, and he has to basically hold on to the vial while also holding on to her, and she's dropped into the water filled with all these creatures, and it's a very tense and kind of heartbreaking scene of seeing Chris Pratt's watching her die when she told him that she watched him die. And so there's that parallel of them, kind of the relationship that they formed in this timeline, which is very interesting. But then you get the idea that he's going to take back this vial, mass produce it in the past, and he wanted to bring it back to the future to save her world, but no, she wanted him to save his, to stop this war from ever happening. And so that's what he does. He goes back, he's zapped back into the past as he's falling to try to save her, but he's not able to. And so then you get to the third act of the movie, which is not as bad as the first act. You get to bring back characters like J.K. Simmons, and you get to bring back the Charlie character and Edwin Hodge, and they all kind of team up. You get that one character from the future who's now stuck in the past, which again, you have these concepts of this character being stuck in the past, and her character is not yet born yet. But what if she was born? What happens then? I don't know. Does she like meet her younger self, meet her mom before she's born? What happens with this character? I'm actually kind of curious of the logistics in this time travel world, because her timeline is essentially going to be erased by the ending of this movie. So how is she still in our timeline? Again, logical inconsistencies, but who cares, because it was a very fun action scene that we just watched, and a very fun action scene that we're going to get later on, because they discovered that these aliens kind of just appeared onto the Earth, and they started attacking, starting in Russia and spreading to the entirety of the world, and we don't know when they actually got there, because satellites never saw any ships crash land into Russia, and there's kind of a mystery behind it. And so Chris Pratt's character, along with the help of a student who really loves volcanoes, which is kind of really dumb, because just go to any other scientist character that knows volcanoes instead of some kid in your science class. It had a laugh to it, but at the same time, like, what? But they discovered that these aliens had crash landed on Earth millions, or maybe not millions, but hundreds, thousands of years before. And so it's been in the ice in Russia for so long. And in 30 years, those polar ice caps and those glaciers melt, essentially releasing these alien creatures into the world. And so has a tiny little global warming hint of it's very thin. But the movie really could have pushed a hard, global warming type of aspect to it, but it didn't. It's just kind of there. The ice caps melt, and that's what happens in 30 years. But they decide to go over there to kill them in the past so that nothing ever happens in the future, which there's a very stupid storyline where they go to the government and they're like, oh, no, we don't want to send you over there because what's going to happen? So they have to do it on their own. And it's like, why not get more help? Because you have these 8 or so characters going to Russia to fight an entire army of these creatures, and it's like, get the government's help. Maybe the movie just didn't have the budget to, maybe the writers wanted them to be on their own, but there wasn't reason enough to not get the military and the UN involved in this. I know they say, oh, maybe it's going to take a long time, but maybe instead of rushing this with a certain small amount of this toxin to kill these things, maybe mass produce it even more and have a stronger plan, a more foolproof plan that won't end up with 2 characters trying to fight this one queen, and if this queen gets away, then who knows what's going to happen with the world. I don't know, it just didn't seem very smart to me, but it was still an entertaining scene. They're able to kill these things, the toxin works, so his daughter didn't die in the future in vain, that timeline did not die in vain, because it's able to help this world. Chris Pratt and J.K. Simmons have a battle with one of these queen, what are they called, white spikes, and they're able to defeat it. There's a funny, really dumb gag with a snowman that was just so unbelievably stupid, but it got me dying laughing. And Charlie's character is finally able to do something and be useful for once. Charlie takes this saw and has more use to this giant circular saw thing than that one character did in Army of the Dead. So at least this character had that moment, and that character in Army of the Dead didn't. So good on you, Charlie, for having that saw and killing that one white spike. Good for you. And again, with different concepts and ideas, this father-son relationship between Chris Pratt and J.K. Simmons was a fairly thin relationship. These characters were not fleshed out to nearly as much as Chris Pratt and Yvonne. They were mainly just built up in the second act, and having that separation between the first act and the third act with these characters really gave no opportunity for the other side characters in this movie to have more of a character arc than just what they had in this movie. So the father-son relationship was very thin and did not have as much impact as I wanted to have, but the scene of them fighting, it was a little bit over the top. You have Chris Pratt's punching the creature and never getting hit by it, having him stab it and go up in front of it and basically come out unharmed, which is just okay. And it has a happy ending with the family and all that, and it was just okay, it was a fun, disposable action movie that had some great concept and ideas, like the whole thing that he went to the future and saw his daughter when she was growing up. That was the strongest concept that this movie had, that it actually explored. Other ideas like them coming from the future to the past, and they're the younger characters, because they didn't want to see that they didn't exist in that timeline. That was not, they didn't really do anything with that, or the idea that these characters are going to the future because they die before these aliens even get out. And then you have the whole thing of them erasing that timeline, so that future war really didn't matter. And so there's a bunch of different ideas that this movie has, that it's a very sci-fi movie, that they throw ideas at the wall and they see what sticks, and most of it does not stick, but that doesn't stop this movie from being entertaining enough to watch. I honestly did wish I watched it in a big screen in the theater because of the visual spectacle that this movie had and that excellent action scene to cap off the second act. Overall, I do think I would recommend this to fans of action, sci-fi, alien invasion, time travel movies because it was serviceable enough in that aspect. Yes, is there logical inconsistencies all over the place in this? Absolutely. Is there a bunch of side characters that don't really matter at all and they're just kind of cannon fodder? Of course there are, but the overall movie was entertaining, and that's a lot more you can say than a lot of other movies that try to be as grand and epic as this movie tries to be. So that is my spoiler-filled review for The Tomorrow War. What did you guys think about it? I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you guys all hated it. I enjoyed it enough, so comment down below your thoughts on this movie, other ideas, things that I didn't talk about, and also check out my review for Fear Street 1994, the part 1 of this trilogy that Netflix is doing. I'm very excited to keep talking about that along with Loki. I have my review series for Loki going on right now, so definitely subscribe to the channel and watch all of those things, and I can't wait for you guys to check out my next one.